Chapter 4 is another long one, so here we go with part 2. I know. Ralph was eager to show off his knowledge. I used to see them in the parking lot outside the hotel. They were always full of children and luggage, and sometimes a dog or two. Chum ignored the interruption. We soon found ours was not the only cage to go into the station wagon. Our sisters were loaded in beside us, along with a box of turtles, a cage of rather downhearted canaries, and 2 large cages, one containing puppies and the other some very silly kittens. Oh yes, and a cage of white mice. White mice? Said Ralph scornfully. Anybody, not just owls, could see white mice in the dark. Then the man with the doggy-smelling hands climbed into the front seat along with his wife, and we were off. Where to? Asked Ralph. The county fair, answered Chum, and it was a terrible trip. Kittens meowed, puppies whimpered, turtles scrabbled around in their box. What's a county fair? Interrupted Ralph. A noisy place, said Chum. It's full of people yelling, children laughing and shrieking, machinery that whirls and spins and plays music, all sorts of animals that neigh and moo and baa. It was hot and dusty, and our cages were set out in a booth. By that time, we hamsters were exhausted. It had been light for several hours, and we hadn't had a wink of sleep. I know what you mean, said Ralph with feeling. That was only the beginning, continued Chum. A steady stream of people, mostly children, passed our cages. Big, little, most of them sticky, and all of them noisy. Look, Mommy, look, Daddy, look at the darling little hamsters. I want one. Daddy, buy me a hamster. All morning long. Parents were better. Don't be silly. Of course you can't have a hamster. You didn't take care of the last hamster you had. Come along. We don't have time to look at hamsters. Then a whole busload of children, all of them wearing white t-shirts with the letters across the front. Camp t-shirts, interrupted Ralph knowledgeably, from Happy Anchors. Came crowding around the booth. They didn't have any parents with them, so they bought pets. You? Asked Ralph. Me, said Chum. I was bought by that grubby girl with freckles. To make a long story short, the doggy hand stuffed me into a hot little cardboard box with a few so-called air holes poked into it, and I spent the rest of the day being jounced around, peeked at, and fed bits of caramel corn. Sounds good, said Ralph. Maybe to a mouse. There was a touch of scorn in Chum's voice. We rode in a bus to this camp, where a counselor put together a makeshift cage out of a bucket with a piece of screen bent over the top. After a few days, the girl's family arrived. There was quite a fuss when the parents saw that their daughter owned a hamster, but her 2 little brothers set up such a howl that once more I was stuffed into a box with so-called air holes, and after more bouncing and jouncing, I arrived at the family's house, where I was put into this cage, where I have lived ever since. Poked at with pencils whenever the children's horrid little friends came over to play. Fed hamster food full of nasty little alfalfa pellets that I keep shoving out of my cage. You'd think they would catch on after a while, but no. They just keep on feeding me food mixed with alfalfa pellets. The worst part of my life is that I never get a full day's sleep. Someone's always moving the cage to dust, rattling something against the bars, running the vacuum cleaner, practicing violin lessons. It's not an easy life, let me tell you. But how did you get back to camp? Ralph wanted to know. Last year, when Lana was packing her duffel bag for camp, her mother said that since the people who ran the camp had let her buy me, they could put up with me for 2 weeks. She was tired of reminding Lana to feed me and clean my cage, and she wanted a vacation herself. She said the same thing this year. So here I am at camp for the 3rd time. Oh well, at least it's a change, and nobody runs a vacuum cleaner or practices the violin near my cage. Ralph was silent. Chum had given him a lot to think about. Like Chum, he sat swinging to and fro on his wheel, swinging and thinking. And as he swung and thought, something caught his eye. It was the striped forepaw of Casto reaching through the hole in the rusty screen door. Ralph watched in frightened fascination. The screen bulged from the pressure of Casto's shoulder as the paw groped and searched. The rusted screen stretched, and the evil paw with its claw unsheathed reached further into the craft shop. "Where's Sam?" thought Ralph in terror. "Why isn't that watchdog watching?" The paw withdrew, and Castro's face pressed into the hole. His evil green eyes searched the craft shop. Ralph shrank into a ball in the farthest corner of his cage until he heard a short bark from Sam and summoned his courage to look around. Casto was gone, but the hole in the rusty screen remained. And that was chapter 4.